Bergen-Fischer Media.
Is it possible to change things? Can I rise above the flood? Will the process cleanse my soul, or is it always in the blood?
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody back to the In the Blood podcast. As you probably already noticed, things are feeling a little different today because this is the first time since the beginning of the show where we've actually got our own made for us music. So if that's put you off, too freaking bad because it's here to stay. If you like it, awesome. You're on the right side of history.
Dun, dun, dun.
I am AC Bergen-Fischer, and with me is the Pooh Bear to my Eeyore, Jason the Dice Man Moore. The reason I say Pooh Bear is because we had an interesting bit of feedback from a listener in Las Vegas who had said that she really enjoys my conversations with Jason. She compared it to like me having conversations with Pooh Bear, but in a good way. So,
Because I'm all that kind of cuddly.
are you so rumbly in your tumbly?
I am rumbly in my tumbly, and I'm craving for honey.
Well, I guess that's just, like your truth, man.
Well, I found that a big compliment, actually. Just want to put that out there.
Okay, so yeah, from now on, anybody who wants to send any correspondence, and make sure you address it to Pooh Bear, and we'll know exactly who to send it to.
Yeah, no.
Anyways, over the last week or so, Jason and I have been bouncing back and forth a phrase that just oof.
You ain't going to be woke after this one.
And before we get into our individual thoughts on this thing, I'm going to read something I found in a Reddit. Is it called a Reddit or a subreddit? I don't really know.
Well, you read it, so whatever.
Okay, so I'm just going to read verbatim what I found on Reddit. It says the quote, I'm already starting off wrong. The phrase, quote unquote, my truth needs to piss right off and die. When you say, quote, I've spoken my truth, or quote, this is my truth, it automatically bears the implication that your truth differs from the truth, as in the objective, definitive truth of what has transpired in a given situation. That shit doesn't fly in court, nor should it ever, but it's often echoed in the court of public opinion, particularly when everyone picks a side before any real evidence has come to light, and then the actual evidence that contradicts said side actually surfaces. It's a means for liars to avoid guilt or consequence for their actions, and a means for judgmental assholes on the internet to justify their knee-jerk reactions that end up being wrong.
I so mirror every nuance of that statement.
Yeah, I feel like I might be putting myself into an uncomfortable corner with joining you in agreeing with this. But man, when somebody says, well, that's just my truth, or dismisses me by saying, well, that's just your truth, I feel like it's a conversation ender because you've lost sight of giving any sort of facts about what is right, and you focus entirely on who is right, or you get so bogged down in the murky, clumpy, nasty waters of political correctness, so afraid of hurting somebody's feelings that we just all agree that we're all correct, even though we're taking wildly different and contradicting positions.
And it has such a negative connotation to the person that is speaking the truth. That you're wrong because my truth is different. I have a super hard time. Oh, I'm getting like all riled up in my head here. I have no problem being wrong. If I say something that I believe is true and somebody points out the truth, okay, I have a thing or two to learn. I will go do research. I will research the crap out of it. Then I will come back and say, here's where I am. There's where I was. Thank you for the information. Okay, now hear me clearly, everybody out there. I was wrong. That's owning my error, not excusing my error because it's my truth. My truth is whatever the facts are. Your truth is whatever the facts are. And the minute you try to subvert that or be condescending to somebody else, that's where I've got a huge problem with the conversation.
Okay, so I feel like in our impassioned, wound up, want to punch some internet douchebag in the face frames of mind that we're dealing with right now, we've started eating this pizza from the middle. I would like to, just for the sake of clarity, maybe like cut this thing into slices and just eat it in some sort of coherent order, which is going to be hard because I don't know about you, but just thinking about this topic has got me super, super triggered, which is not a normal frame of mind for me.
And I will follow your lead. Mhm.
What, in like trying to take this logically or in being pissed the fuck off?
Both. I will civilly be pissed off.
Okay. So if I'm going to boil this thing down to its core and think about, okay, on the most basic, superficial level, what is it specifically about this that is kind of rubbing us the wrong way, to put it super mildly?
Okay.
Super mildly. You hear how mild my voice is?
And my knee just jerked and hit the bottom of the desk.
I think what it comes down to is that people are suggesting that there are multiple truths. Whereas I think, based on conversations you and I have had in the past, I think we're both in agreement that there is only one objective truth, though there may be infinite interpretations of said truth.
Well, okay, so since you wanted me to dial it back, I'm going to kind of go devil's advocate here because I can see where certain people can say my truth and get away with it. Okay.
Okay.
So some people generalize and they see a car accident. Oh, that was horrific. And somebody else may say, well, it was just a car accident. Well, no, that was horrific. No, my truth is that was just a car accident. Your truth is that was horrific because for you, that was horrific. That's fine. And in that context, I can see both sides of the coin.
Okay, so this isn't necessarily limited then. I mean, based on what you're saying, it wouldn't be necessarily limited to interpretation. This would just be an entirely different, I don't even know what word to use. It would be
It totally
like,
depends on the architecture of the synapses that are happening in the moment.
because to take things in a slightly different context, just for the sake of making sure I'm understanding you. Like if you tell me like black olives are delicious,
And they are, yeah.
I hate them.
Mhm.
I don't even know why they exist. Somebody, like, if I had to choose between starving and eating black olives, well, I'm about to go on like a crash diet of super weight loss. I won't eat those things. To me, they are objectively terrible.
Mhm.
And when I say objectively, not because I think like I'm speaking in an absolute truth, but I'm so limited by my own senses, I can't even conceive of a scenario where I might find these things delicious. I can't put myself in your shoes. I have zero frame of reference. So to me, they're super duper icky, even though to you, they're like really, really good.
Right. So in that happenstance, there is your truth and my truth. That I can accept. I like ham and pineapple on pizza. Somebody else may not. Their objective
They're
truth,
wrong.
my objective truth. Well, that's beside the point. But that's their truth and my truth. So that I can accept. What bothers me is when people are trying to argue true scientific fact and altering it because that's their truth.
Okay, so like we often do, we'll go for a completely ridiculous example.
I love those. You do that so well.
We know the sky is blue, you know, assuming it's a cloudless day and is daytime, right?
Okay.
Or I can say at least the sky appears blue to the human eye.
As long as you're not colorblind, yes.
Yeah. Now, if somebody says, well, you know, I really prefer to think of the sky as plaid, a normal person will be like, I don't care what you prefer to think. What you've communicated is that you prefer stupidity and being wrong because the sky is measurably, observably, and demonstrably blue, again, to anybody who's not colorblind.
Mhm.
And if somebody says, well, you know, that's your truth. My truth is the sky is plaid.
Punch in the face. Sorry.
I'm not even really sure what I'm supposed to do with that. Like, my first thought is like, okay, like you've got to be messing with me, right? Or you've got to be dealing with some mental health struggle I'm not aware of. Or you're just an idiot.
And most times it's the latter.
And of course, like we're dealing with a ridiculous example, but I mean, when we're dealing with matters of fact, actually, you know what? I hate doing this. I feel like we've done this a couple times the last couple of weeks. I'm gonna Googleize the definition of fact. Okay, fact from the Oxford Dictionary, a thing that is known or proved to be true. Okay.
But you're using the Oxford Dictionary. That doesn't contain my truth.
But it does seem like it's not just a case of like, well, I know something. It's got to be like some sort of evidentiary basis for it. I mean, you have to be able to
Demonstrably
say,
proven.
yeah, it's not just a case of like, well, this is what I've always known. It's a case of, well, this is what was shown to me using the scientific method. It's been tested, observed, repeated. It's whatever the criteria are to satisfy an evidentiary foundation, that has been done. Okay, that is a
Right.
fact. So when we're talking about the truth, okay, before I go too far deep in here, let's Googleize and see what truth says. Okay, well, this is kind of a stupid definition. I hate when the definition involves the word that it is defining. Truth is the quality or state of being true. So now I got to Googleize true.
Okay.
Okay, true, according to Oxford again, means in accordance with fact or reality. Okay, so we've already like established what fact is.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be known, it has to be supported by evidence.
And it has to be from a plausible reality.
Yeah, and
like purple sky, blue sky.
so I guess really what like if we know what factual is, we know what true is, then we're stuck with the question of reality. And I think that actually is like the first kind of major clue we've gotten as to where this douchebaggery comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Because reality is an entirely subjective experience. While I think that the majority of us are sharing one style of observing most factual things, there are times where somebody's going to be limited by intellect. They're going to be limited maybe by age or experience or education. Possibly they've suffered a brain trauma, which if you're posting "That's My Truth, Man" on Facebook, you definitely got a brain trauma. Sorry, was that allowed? But we are talking about like basically as an immersive experience, which reality is. again, how are we navigating that? What lenses are we looking through when we're seeing reality?
Mhm.
And while I don't think in the extreme example of some idiot seeing the sky and thinking, well, I think it's plaid, I think a case of, well, I mean, let's take it back to something that's like not a hot button topic at all, something that everybody's got a very mildly held opinion on.
Trump.
Close. Does a God exist?
Okay.
So for many years, as most people know, I was a devout Christian and I very, very much believed that a God existed. For the last, I don't even know how long it's been now, what, 11, 12 years, I've been an out and proud atheist. I no longer hold that view that a God exists.
Right.
When I look back on that time when I did hold the God belief, I mean, like there were things that really had me convinced. I mean, first of all, I was surrounded by people that held like-minded beliefs.
Mhm.
Second of all, I mean, I was conditioned from an early age, so I mean, like,
You were indoctrinated. Yeah.
yeah, brainwashed.
Hmm.
If you were gonna like put a gun to my head and say, like, do you feel Jesus in my heart? I mean, like, if I'd said no, I would have been lying to you just because of the gun to my head. But the honest truth was, I was tempted to say the God's honest truth. The the honest truth for me was, though, I could feel Jesus in my heart. I could feel God around me. I could hear his voice in my mind when I prayed, all this other stuff. And I wouldn't ever have reduced my own position by saying, well, that's my truth. To me, that was the truth. You
Okay.
pushed back on that a lot, right?
Oh yes. Sometimes with a couple bricks.
Right. But I mean, never once did I hear you say, well, I understand that's your truth, but my truth is such and such and such.
No. Right.
I don't want to like put words in your mouth, but I mean, like when somebody comes to you with a position like that, well, I know it's true because I feel like it's true. I mean, how would you push back on that now?
These days, in most cases, I just let them rest. Let them sit in their blissful ignorance.
Okay, well, let's take it back a few years when you still would engage, though. I mean, at any point would you have said, well, that's your truth?
Well, I'm happy you believe that. Then I would have pushed back with my fairy tale story. I like watching Disney, but Tinkerbell doesn't really exist. It's a fictional character.
Right.
And it's not. I'm not trying to be rude, but well, actually, no, that's not true. I kind of am trying to be rude. Well, we're talking truth here. My
Pooh
truth is
Bear's
I'm
got
trying
the
to be
claws
rude.
out today.
Um, so I am kind of trying to be rude, and I am kind of trying to give offense because I like people to examine their thoughts, even if they come back afterwards, still believing in this mythical God and these fairy tale fantasies about God making mountains because tectonic plate shift doesn't exist or something. At least they thought about it. They gave it some genuine consideration and still came out with the same conclusion. At least I took them for a moment into thought. That's the whole reason I would provoke somebody into thought like that by my words.
Yeah, I think you and I have different approaches, but I mean, we're setting the same goals. I mean, if somebody comes to me with something that I think is absolute nonsense,
Mhm.
well, I mean, there are times where I'm just tired and ill-tempered and don't care about the person. I'll just say, well, that is nonsense and leave it at that. But more often than not, I'll say something along the lines of, well, that's actually really, really interesting. How did you come to that conclusion?
Mhm.
Now, if somebody can walk me down the road of like the steps they took to find themselves convinced, I've got the option of pushing back on any one of those steps. There have been times where it's just a case of, well, you know what? And again, like I would never say agree to disagree because to me that just
Mhm.
sounds too much like, okay, well, I guess we're all right in our own ways. Like
Yeah.
I still am going to hold the position that, like, well, you and me. I mean, here's a firsthand example. You believe in ghosts and or spirits or something fitting that generalish description, right? Like some sort of life after death.
Very generally, but yes.
I don't, like not even a little bit,
Right.
right? We have both come to our positions through a lot of skeptical thinking, a lot of open-minded research, this, that, the other thing,
Hmm.
contrasted with personal experience, yada, yada, yada. Don't want to bore anybody with the details. But long story short, you're convinced that you're sitting in a correct position, and I'm convinced that I'm sitting in a correct position. I'm not going to sit there thinking, well, that's your truth. I'm honest enough to say, I think you're wrong.
Hmm.
Now, as much as I'm not going to go so soft as to
Hold
say
on. Can
that's
I
your
cut you off for
truth.
one quick second? I'm
Yeah.
really sorry because I really want to point this issue here. And I would totally rest in that because I'm never in such an absolute position that I believe I'm 100% right. If you said that to me, I would 100% allow it because there's always that option that I'm wrong. So to fight back would be to, in essence, be lying and doing the my truth thing.
Yeah.
See
And,
where I'm
and,
going
and
with that?
I think we're both in that position.
Yeah.
And that's why I think like also like you and I have learned to qualify things. Like we used to like really grind on each other where you would just say, well, you are wrong, or I would say you are wrong.
Or when
Now
we
we
talked
use
about
the
religion, I said, yeah, but I don't believe in Santa Claus either. And you've gotten mad at me for that.
but now we qualify things with like, I think you're wrong.
Right.
So we could get really, really mamsy pamsy and super soft and say, well, that's your truth. We don't go quite that soft. We also don't go quite so hard as to saying you are definitely wrong,
Hmm.
even if it does appear that way.
Right.
We don't know enough to know everything, right? So I mean, like we have to leave some wiggle room.
And either one of us
And
could be right.
sure.
Hmm.
I mean, I am not aware of any convincing evidence that anything to do with anything resembling our consciousness survives the human body, or at least survives the death of the human body.
Right.
I'm not willing to commit to the fact that I am absolutely right on that.
Hmm.
I don't believe anything different, but in the light of new evidence, I could change my mind in an instant. Same with any other question. I don't believe in leprechauns, unicorns, or Jesus, but you show me evidence of any of them, and I'll just be, oh, okay, I was wrong. Cool. Thanks for pointing that out. Moving
Now,
on.
I'm going to qualify this real evidence, not a mountain, not a past story from somebody rising 3 days after he was dead, like real, hard, concrete evidence. Hey, shake his hand. This is Jesus.
But like I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for that evidence. I don't think there's anything wrong with like when you're in the face of something which from your perspective seems absolutely ridiculous, you're not in the wrong for saying, you know what, I don't believe you. I don't agree with
Mhm.
you. There's nothing wrong with saying, like, I think you actually are misinformed. If what we value is getting to know each other, we should have an interactive conversation. If we value the truth, we should pursue it. As soon as, well, that's just your truth, that's my truth, we've put the truth on hold, like the
Mhm.
actual truth. Even if I'm right and I say, well, that's my truth, I've deprived myself of an opportunity to explain to you where I'm coming from.
And you've lowered the common denominator of truth. You've made it
Yeah,
now non-absolute.
which really, if when facts become completely interpretive, completely subjective,
Mhm.
how do we communicate anything of value anymore?
Right.
And I think that's my biggest problem with it. It's not really just picking on somebody's like
Truth.
frou-frou language.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just I don't like getting hung up in like the words people choose necessarily. It's the intent behind the words, right? I mean, we've had this conversation before without geeking out too hard. Words have no inherent value, but they are vehicles to communicate points.
Correct.
Now, if what we're going to do is just say, well, every word means everything, You may as well just be sitting there looking at the other person going, because that's how much word, how much meaning you've given to your sentences.
And you've taken dictionaries out of existence because they're no longer valid because every word means everything.
Yeah.
I think there's an inherent um, trend happening that is going to either die really quickly or totally change the reality of conversation and understanding. One of those two things is going to happen because even now it dilutes true perspective if it's somebody else's truth, because now they're telling you to question everything you know, which scientifically is part of the theory. You question everything in science. I just, until it's proven, it's nonsense.
Yeah, agreed. So I just
So
found this message thread on Quora, and there was somebody named Julie. She said in regards to, quote, "That's my truth." She says, "I find this phrase incredibly annoying. There is no such thing as, quote, my truth. There is the truth, and then there are opinions or perceptions. People often say they are speaking their truth in order to prevent anybody from asking them questions because they are afraid someone will poke holes in their story." That's an angle I hadn't considered.
mhm. Well, it also takes away any objectivity because now you can't put any kind of realization. It shows how closed-minded you are because you're not willing to look at opposite opinions or opposite viewpoints or opposing viewpoints.
And now that I think about it, I realize that, and I think you and I are probably guilty of this sometimes as well, maybe without even realizing it. When you have an opinion, well, I'm not going to say you. Sometimes when I have an opinion, I won't say, well, my opinion is that such and such and such. I will say something along the lines of, well, I feel like blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the reason that I do that is because whereas my opinions could be called into question, my feelings cannot. There's no way for a feeling to be wrong.
Right.
Now, when you say like that's my truth, I think that's just a different flavor of that same kind of like maybe subconscious or bullshit deflection.
Now, see, I on a very consistent basis say, okay, so in my opinion, when we're talking about something, but that is licensed to you like chocolate, I like butterscotch. In my opinion, butterscotch is better. So whenever we're talking, I use the phrase very, you can listen back, and out of the last 15 episodes we've done, I probably said it 15 times because I don't, okay, so this is my head thought. I don't mind being challenged. So if I put my opinion out there and somebody thinks, no, chocolate's better and chocolate's better because blah, 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 then I will read their facts why they think chocolate is better. And okay, so to them, that's fact because chocolate for them is better. Only because now I can understand their opinion. It's not going to change my opinion, but I can now understand their opinion because they wanted to prove why chocolate is better.
No, I think that kind of makes sense, right? Like most people, they drink a cup of coffee and it kind of perks them up. And they're like, oh, wow, I can't function in the morning without my coffee.
Mhm.
I don't really much care for coffee in the morning,
Right.
and it does absolutely nothing to perk me up. To me,
Mhm.
it's a wasted step.
Yeah, it's enjoyable, but it's not because it does anything for me. So I like the flavor.
So, I mean, the reality is like for me as an individual, it doesn't work. I'm not saying it doesn't work in general terms. I mean, obviously it works very, very well for a lot of people. For me, no.
Having owned a coffee shop, it very much differentiates between physiologies.
Right? Results may vary, like most things in life.
Yep.
I could handle that too. It's like anything other than that's my truth. It's something about like how absolute truth is perceived to be where it's like I'm not willing to grant it that flexibility. I feel like I just did. See, like I feel like we give up too much valuable ground when we make a concession like that. And I don't want this to sound like two old men bitching because people are speaking differently these days. I want everybody to understand like how much of a disservice you're doing to yourself at any point you're failing to make when you come out with some nonsense like that's my truth. It just doesn't work.
Mhm.
Somebody named Arjun wrote, when somebody says that's my truth, what they're saying is that's the fantasy I believe in my mind, and that's the lie I want to hold on to.
Yeah, fair enough. I to add on to what you were saying before that though, I find it also to be super condescending.
Oh, big time.
That's, I think, my biggest problem with it. Not only are you saying that what I know to be real or true by the dictionary term, you're saying that you know better than the brightest minds in the freaking world.
It's kind of like they're patting you on the head and saying, "Oh, sweetie."
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing you're pretty. Yeah.
I've never heard that once in my life.
Well, I have. So that was when I had teeth. So, in closing, since most of the episode has been you, which is finally good because the other ones have mostly been me. In closing, where do you want to pin this?
Okay, I'm gonna do a callback to something we've spoken about relentlessly since 2017, which is that offense is taken, it's not given. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I bring that up is because whenever we have to explain that position, we always have to say, you're not giving yourself license to be a jerk. You need to still be considerate of the other people's position. And it's like that whole you don't have license to be a jerk part that I really want to focus on. When you say that's your truth or that's my truth, I'm sorry, but you are being a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
You're being a jerk if you dismiss somebody else by saying, well, effectively, this thing that is demonstrably true that you're expressing, I reject that in favor of my bullshit fantasy. That is being really unkind and unreasonably just nasty to that person. If you say, well, I don't have a substantial argument to justify my position, I'm probably full of shit, but I don't want to grant that. You're robbing somebody else of the win, which I still think is a dick move.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, I'm ending this conversation where we started, which is with my fists balled up and hating this stupid saying. Stop using it. That's my takeaway. Stop.
Damn it, stop it.
It's just if I had a newspaper, I would roll it up and whack somebody in the nose. Just no.
Oh, bother. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the finish you were looking for, but that's the finish I've got to offer.
Well, like always, I'm never looking for anything, just truth. All right, everybody. So thank you very much for joining us on another episode. Thank you very much for your time. And do not forget, put your beeping comments into our email so we can get back at you.